Ms. Fumiha.
Mr. Speaker, the topic of raising goods and services tax, or GST, is difficult and unpopular. This is especially so given the heightened inflation and concerns around cost of living. My residents are feeling the pinch, and the bad news is that inflation is expected to be prolonged this time. The GST hike was first announced in 2018 and 5 years in the making. We have had many debates in Parliament, including today. And speaking on behalf of my residents, I've made repeated appeals asking the government to consider alternative revenue sources, delay the increase, and provide support to Singaporeans to cope with the impact. So this year alone, I raised questions on 5 separate occasions. Sir, I thank both Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat, then the Finance Minister, and Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, the Finance Minister now, for their patience and for going to great lengths to explain the rationale behind GST increase, as well as the commitment to cushion the impact to middle and lower income households. Sir, it is undeniable that the government spending is set to increase on multiple fronts. There are many meritorious commitments made by the government, including support for parents dealing with childcare and education. We just heard about HDB subsidies for young couples in the form of housing subsidies, the big deficit that HDB is recording, for our workers in the form of higher wages. We've all been championing that, and all the upskilling initiatives, and not to say the significant investments in the Singapore Green Plan. And we all in this House have said yes to all of these. Take the case of healthcare spending, and I feel that for that a lot. Since I became an MP in 2011, I have witnessed firsthand the positive impact on our seniors and their families of successive healthcare support schemes, such as MediShield Life, CHARS, the Enhanced CHARS, Pioneer Generation Package, and the Merdeka Generation Package. The step change I've seen that the government has provided in healthcare provision affords great peace of mind to our seniors and their families, and greatly reduces their financial burden. I must acknowledge that during this same period, we have seen healthcare costs more than triple. And given our rapidly aging population, is projected to reach 59 billion by 2030 from 22 billion in 2018. Furthermore, the pandemic experience reminds us how crucial it is to continue to invest in our healthcare system in order to be able to respond effectively to future pandemics and emergencies. So the hard truth is that all these need to be paid for. The government has singled out increasing healthcare costs as a primary driver for the need to increase GST. We've had many debates in this House, like I said, on how we should pay for these higher expenditures. I must admit, I'm one of them. Members of the opposition have repeatedly called for more of reserves to be used to meet rising expenditure. On this, I disagree. It would be unfair to future generations if we were to raid our reserves and leave them with less. Contributions from our reserve to fund public expenditures has already doubled in 10 years, ballooning from 8 billion in 2011 to 20 billion in 2021. Indeed, since 2016, I've observed that our reserve had already become the single largest contributor to budget. The fiscal strength of Singapore is built upon a diversity of revenue streams. Increasing our dependency on the reserves to fund expenditures will further tilt the balance towards unhealthy concentration risk. Our reserves also served as a precious war chest that saw us through the crisis of a generation. We drew about $37 billion to fight the COVID pandemic. And we are unlikely to be able to put back what we've drawn anytime soon. It would be wrong for us to contemplate taking more and leaving less for the next generation. This is particularly at a time when the world is getting more divided and more dangerous because of contentious geopolitics, disrupted supply chains, and existential climate change challenges. Those coming after us would need more, not less, of a buffer of financial resources to secure their future. Mr. Speaker, in his 2022 budget roundup speech, DPM Lawrence Wong had provided detailed account on why a GST hike is needed, alongside hikes to personal income tax, property tax, and vehicle tax. The choices, unfortunately, that he laid out point to the inevitable increase, however reluctant we may to support it. But the government has committed to cushion the impact of GST increase with assurance package, covering at least 5 years of additional GST expenses for majority of Singaporean households and about 10 years for lower income households. We've also seen the enhancement to the permanent GST voucher scheme to provide continuing offsets for GST expenses for lower to middle income households and most retiree households, therefore providing beyond the transitional period covered by the assurance package. And also in response to our numerous queries on support for cost of living, the government has consistently responded that it would do more should the need arise. And I am therefore reassured to see the government make good on this commitment with the successive rounds of household support packages, including the latest $1.5 billion announced in October, adding up to a total of $3.5 billion this year alone. Now, such actions by the government go some way to assure fellow Singaporeans that our government has our back. I note that these support measures are funded from better than expected fiscal outcomes in the first half of financial year 2022, with no draw on past reserves. I would like to ask, what would happen if we encountered the need for a similar response at a time when our fiscal outcome is less favorable? Sir, with the government support measures shielding lower and middle income households from the impact of GST increase, the question is, who then bears the burden of GST increase? As GST is a consumption tax, those who consume more naturally pay more. Over 60% of net GST is paid by the top 20% of Singaporean households, foreigners living in Singapore, and tourists net of refunds. Then the next question usually comes, is Singapore getting too expensive and therefore less competitive? After all, the wealthy are globally mobile, and with so many schemes from around the world wooing them, will they still choose Singapore in which to invest, build their business, and bring good jobs? Keeping in mind that GST is not the only tax they face. For example, the foreigners are subjected to 30% additional buyer stamp duty to purchase property, over 5 times more for hospital ward, and up to 70 times more to attend Singapore secondary school. I've spoken on numerous occasions in the past about the premium that Singapore commands in a volatile and uncertain world because we enjoy the rule of law, stability, safety, and international connectivity. This has not been lost on investors and wealthy families who choose to base themselves out of Singapore, and they will continue to do their calculations. We must therefore continue to ensure that Singapore's remain their destination of choice, even if we cannot be the most price competitive location. Mr. Speaker, whilst I agree that the GST and cost of living support measures should be targeted at providing the most support to shield lower income and retiree households, increases in the cost of living has put the squeeze on middle income families, especially those who have their income growth have stagnated. Let me say that again. On middle income families, especially those whose income growth have stagnated. I often hear middle income residents share the challenge they face to sustain their financial commitments and the frustrations of not being able to maintain their way of life. They worry about the adequacy of their safety nets should they lose their jobs or suffer a life-changing event. We must do more to support this group and give them greater assurance. Sir, with so many support schemes being announced, the government should make it easy for people to understand how the various schemes apply to them and how they will be paid out. Currently, not all eligible beneficiaries can understand how the slew of support scheme will benefit them, as they vary in eligibility cutoffs, payment modes, flat type, household size, and so on. Finally, there are genuine concerns on the ground that businesses could use GST as a cover to raise prices. So I'd like to call on the government to monitor this space closely through the Committee Against Profiteering and to check inflation fueled by opportunistic price increases. Mr. Speaker, this is a difficult bill coming at a challenging time. We have a long list of deserving initiatives that warrant government funding, especially those towards supporting our healthcare and social expenditures to take care of our seniors and retirees, given our rapidly aging society. We must, therefore, with courage and wisdom, confront the question of how to pay for them today whilst safeguarding Singapore's tomorrow. I support the bill.